It was trash. Just one giant heaping flame of
Yep.
garbage. Like,
Yep. Yep. Hello, welcome to Keeping Watch, the show that holds elected officials accountable and provides updates on what's going on in Florida politics. I'm Natasha Sutherland, Deputy Director at Florida Watch, and we're going to have some really interesting stuff. Session has been crazy, but as always, I've had some fabulous guests in to talk with us around reproductive justice, and we've got Ida back to talk to us about the latest in legislative session. It's going to be a jam-packed show, really crazy, but really interesting, so stay tuned.
Since you are here enjoying our show, please make sure to follow us on all of our socials so you can experience all Florida Watch and Keeping Watch news and information. We are at Florida Watch on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube. While you're at it, check out our website at floridawatch.org and our partner website at progressflorida.org.
I'm very excited. I have a friend and colleague on the show today, Melanie Williams, and she is the chair of an organization called Black in Repro. Welcome, Melanie. How you doing?
Thank you, Natasha. Excited to be here. I'm doing good. How are you?
You know, girl, hanging in there. We got not much longer, and yes, it's going to be, session's about to be over. Like, we've got all kinds of stuff coming down the pipe. Like, I'm just ready to move on and figure out what the summer holds for us here. So,
definitely agreed.
So, man, I don't even know where to start. Legislative session, it's been crazy, as we all know, right? You know, and specifically when it comes to reproductive justice, which in a moment I'll have you kind of explain to folks what that even is, if you don't mind. But, you know, legislators just passed not too long ago, right, the 6-week abortion ban. And it just seems like they're just hell-bent on taking away all of our rights, whether that's bodily autonomy, whether that's access to gender-affirming care, and so on and so forth. But before we dive into that, could you kind of tell us a little bit about yourself and the Black and Repro space? And then what is reproductive justice?
Yes. So I love to start off my story here as a reproductive justice advocate, talking about how I got into the movement in general. So I was a student at Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida at the time when Trayvon Martin was murdered in 2012.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So when that happened, one of my classmates at the time, she was actually 17. She's one of those smart people who graduated high school early. So she's in a college class with a bunch of 19 and 20-year-olds. And she's actually the one who told us about it. She asked the professor for some time at the end of class to tell us about a situation and make a call to action. So she went up, she had on a hoodie, and she told us the scenario. She told us the news. At this point, it wasn't really big news yet. We hadn't heard about it. George Zimmerman wasn't even arrested yet. And she told us what happened. And she asked that we all call the Sanford Police Department and demand that George Zimmerman be arrested. At that point in time, I was not yet involved in or interested even in politics. I was actually majoring in English at FAMU. I loved reading, writing. I loved poetry. I was a creative writer. So, you know, politics wasn't even anywhere on my radar, but I think her call to action was really moving, especially when she said, I'm 17, that could have been me. And so I called the police department. I said, you know, I'm calling because I believe George Zimmerman should be arrested. It was just, you know, a secretary or something. And she said, okay, thank you. And when I hung up, it was just like a light bulb went off in my head. Like, okay, we have, you know, as individually, we have so much power. So what's the next step? What can we do collectively? And of course, that was 11 years ago now. So much has transpired.
Wow.
I am a founding member of the Dream Defenders here in Florida. Many of you know about them. Just this week, they had some really good actions here, just to
Mm-hmm.
continue to point out the unfortunate case that is Florida at this time, the unfortunate reality that is our legislature, and the fact that so many bad things are continuously happening. So they took a stand, of course, and did some direct action this week in the Capitol. So starting off with that organization, I got to learn hands-on what policymaking looks like,
Mm-hmm.
and just different ways that we can engage in the process beyond voting. So I was able to register voters, talk to voters around electoral issues, but being in the state capitol, I also have the unique opportunity to be involved in the legislative process. So although I was not a political science student, I was learning policy and politics basically in the street, so to speak.
Yeah,
So,
like an
I just,
internship almost.
yeah, it was like an internship. I was in the Capitol, literally reading law for the first time. And I just realized that there are not enough young people, there are not enough Black people, there are not enough women who
Mm-hmm.
are involved in this process. Following the Stand Your Ground law, at the time, there were some bills up to expand it, and seeing what the debate looked like, what the committee conversations looked like, and who was testifying. I was just, in a state of disbelief that this was happening right here, literally down the street from where I lived, and I had no clue of the process. So I just became hooked, and I stayed in the movement for a long time. I currently work in the reproductive justice, reproductive rights space, and what reproductive justice is, and I think that I love sharing that part of my story first of all, because I feel like so many times we hear reproductive anything and we think, okay, like we're going to hear about sex ed, or we're going to hear about something dealing specifically with reproductive health. And that's probably what brought her to this work. And I think one of the major tenets of reproductive justice that just has stuck with me since I learned about it is that we do have a right to raise the children that we choose to have in a safe, healthy, free environment. And,
That's right.
Trayvon's story, you know, I met Trayvon's parents. I met the parents of Jordan
Wow.
Davis. I met the parents of Kendrick Johnson up in Valdosta, Georgia, who still to this day has not, justice hasn't been served in his case. So just making that connection, right, and understanding like the state sanctioned violence, whether it's police or it's like these vigilante individuals who feel like they can operate as the police of their community, that does fall under the scope of reproductive justice. But going back a little bit, so that's one of the major tenets. And then it's the right that we have to choose whether or not we want to be parents, and then when and how that's going to take place. And then, of course, one of the most important as well is the right to bodily autonomy. So all those things encompass reproductive justice, and reproductive justice is something that, of course, Black women founded, because the fight for reproductive rights really did not include the struggle that we face at the intersection of gender and race. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what reproductive justice is. I could definitely talk more to who Black and Repro is and what we do and why we exist as well.
Yeah. Well, so I'm just thinking about when you're talking about reproductive justice, and it is the right to choose whether or not to have children. And I can't help but, as a Black woman, immediately go back to our enslaved ancestors who did not have that choice, right? Forced to carry, and then their children ripped out of their arms and sold. And I mean, I just, this has been an issue for us, for our people, since the beginning, right? And there is nothing more important, in my opinion, than making sure that we don't lose that fundamental right. It's I just had to paint that picture. I know a lot of folks out there may not be thinking about that, because maybe that history isn't really something that they're connected to in the ways that Black people are on this half of the planet, actually. If you're really thinking about history and stuff. And so I think that it's just really important to take that moment and to think about that. And then, just basic, bodily autonomy, like the right to choose whatever, for myself, again, harkens back to that period of where people just did not have that right. And there's nothing on this green earth that's gonna let me not fight that fight. Like, that's just so fundamental. So thank you, first of all, for leading in that space. Really, really appreciate it. Up until becoming acquainted with you and Black and Repro and all that, I didn't understand what reproductive justice was. I was like, wait, justice, reproductive? Like, how do those two things go together, right? And you've really helped to illustrate what that means for folks that maybe don't fully understand it. And it really is everything. It's just like the fundamental right to be a human being, with the freedom to do what is best for you. So yeah, I don't know. So can you just talk a little bit about what is Black and Repro?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you brought up the history. I feel like that's so important. And we often, especially in movement spaces, we're talking about social justice, we're talking about the struggle. We do talk about history a lot. I think that there is definitely a disconnect when we're talking about all of the issues that we face in our history. And there's so much to learn, there's so much to teach, that it's hard to really capture all of this that we need to. And so that's why I think that this space is so crucial, reproductive justice. I think that as a framework, as a theory, as an actual space in the social justice movement is so critical. And it goes even deeper than that. I know you talked about like us being forced to give birth and become impregnated our enslaved ancestors, and even a step further after that, the forced sterilization of our people. So it goes both ways. Definitely, I think that if you believe people should have the right to bodily autonomy, then that's everything under the sun. You know what I'm saying? You shouldn't pick and choose based on whatever you feel about abortion or carrying to term, whatever the case is, whatever you feel about children and all of that. That doesn't matter. It's really that individual's decision, and they should be empowered and have the tools to do what they need to do. And it's really health. It's the holistic approach to health and us being in charge of our own health that we still really don't have. So yeah, that's why I do this work. I love this work. But Black and Repro, it's May now, so we're a little bit over a year old. We started last April, and we're actually a work group of a statewide coalition in the state of Florida called Floridians for Reproductive Freedom. And so we started last April. A few of our members in Floridians for Reproductive Freedom, FRF, a few of the members who are Black decided, we need a space that's specific to us so that we can continue to build on the tenets of reproductive justice. We need to bring, we need to bring people we know are on the front lines in Florida doing reproductive justice work, people who are providing direct care, whether it's through midwifery or doula services in the state of Florida, together so that they can collaborate with the Black people on the front lines of policy and advocacy, trying to make sure that, we have access to rights, whether they're rights to have an abortion or all of the things that come with becoming pregnant, having a safe and healthy pregnancy, and then, what it takes after that pregnancy. As a parent myself, I can tell you it's not an easy thing to navigate. If you come from a working class family, nothing is laid out for you. Nothing is nothing is pre-planned. You don't have access to a healthcare system that is, that is what it should be. So being an
Right.
advocate and an activist before I was a mother definitely prepared me. Because being a Black mother, being from a working class home, and even I'm the child of two immigrants, so many
Same.
things at play, right? So many things at play with us getting access to the basic resources that we need, and then navigating a public education system for our children in the state of Florida. As you know, that's literally at every turn just being decimated and money being pulled out of. So just this space is unique in the coalition world because of the fact that oftentimes we're bringing together folks who are already doing the work, who may not have the same access or knowledge of the resources to actually help them do that work. So these are people that may have full-time jobs doing something else, or, you know, started a nonprofit or started an agency to help people of color, to help Black birthing people, Black women, and don't have the same resources and platform that larger nonprofit organizations do. So it's like we're working twofold. We're working within the system, and we're fighting and combating really laws that are racist and biased against us. But at the same time, we're working within a nonprofit and an ecosystem that we do still have to struggle within to gain the basic access to resources. And I mean, we don't have, you know, we don't have an organ, like the fact that this coalition work group started a year ago and it's 2023, that's, you know, that's proof in itself that we don't
Yeah.
have the same infrastructure that our counterparts in this movement space have. So we're here to combat that. We're here to grow this space, bring in more people that we already know are doing the work, educate our people on two things, on reproductive justice and the legislative and lawmaking process, and bring those things together to keep pushing for better policies in Florida.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, you know, anytime people like say, you know, to me, oh, you know, Black and repro or anything Black, right? Why, you know, why do we need that? Well, because nobody is talking to us. Nobody is, you know, addressing needs that are unique to us because our life experiences are unique. Like you know, and not to, you know, diminish it at all, but for people that really, 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 really don't get it, I say to them, okay, so let's say, for example, I don't know, however many years ago, not too long ago, I'd go to the grocery store or wherever and go down the hair care aisle, and there would be nothing for my hair. Or I go down the aisle for, you know, first aid kits and stuff, and, you know, say, okay, the Band-Aids you take for granted, they're your color, but they're not colors for everybody, right? Like it's sometimes it's like, you know, just making sure that we're customizing things for people based on their unique needs. And even when it is an umbrella for an entire race, it's still not enough, right? Like we're all different. We have different, you know, desires and needs and things like that. And so, you know, if somebody complains like, oh, why you got Black and repro? Are you gonna do it? Oh, you're not. Okay, well, how about you worry about yourself and we're gonna just keep doing our thing, right? Like, how is it? There's enough of the pie for everybody, right? So I don't know. Just for anybody listening that's like, I don't get it. Well, okay, well then it's not for you, so it's fine.
I think, I mean, you bring up a fair point. I really didn't think about people complaining, but I feel
People
like
can find something to complain about. You know that.
Period. Working in this space, it's been a little over a year, but like I said, there's so many things under the umbrella of reproductive justice that we really have to come into that realization that, especially as people who can't get pregnant or people who want to get pregnant in the future and things like this is something that should be a part of our mindset when we approach our work. If we're talking about gun violence, if we're talking about education, we're talking about access to menstrual products in schools, like this is a part of, we should think about it with this framework, simply because at some point in time it'll impact you and you may not realize it. I think that as a parent, looking back, I didn't really, you know, people used to ask me when I was a younger actor, I became an activist at 19, I'm 31. So when I was a younger activist and people would ask me like, why do you do this? You know, I didn't have that personal connection. You know, I didn't grow up where I was targeted by police or anything like that for my race. I grew up in a pretty diverse area, so I don't have that direct experience to Trayvon necessarily, but I think that it impacted me because I always, you know, I grew up in a big family, a lot of siblings, a lot of cousins, and I kind of always knew that at some point I wanted to be a mother. So I would say one day I'll have a Black husband and Black children, and, you know, I have to fight for them and protect them. And looking back, I didn't realize in the moment, but I think reproductive justice has always been something that was near and dear to my heart, because I realized that, I mean, look, these parents of the young Black people who are unfortunately targeted and killed by this system or victimized by this system, they are forced to become activists and advocates after that happens, whether that's a career they wanted to choose or not. You see some of these parents, they go on to create foundations to help children in need or to fight to change policies in their communities. You see parents becoming Congress people. Like, it's just, you see the
Yeah.
impact on their lives. And I think that the more of us who get involved before or regardless of something happening that directly to our children or our families, that, that makes a difference. And I think that also, it's like, why wait for something to have such a direct impact on you, to fight to make a difference? I think for people who don't understand why Black people need a separate or our own, it's because they grew up and they've been nurtured and socialized in a society where they can see themselves reflected at any turn. A great example is what's happening in our entertainment industry. We have so many stories being retold and recreated, and these characters are not real. You know what I'm saying? Completely fake, completely fictitious, made up, just imagination.
Right.
And so to recreate them with a Black person in mind, shouldn't really be a big deal. But if you go on the internet, if you look at the blogs, if you look at the social media comment sections, the news comment sections, people are up in arms and people are upset because this character, as we've known them for all our lives, have always been white. They've always reflected us. And I think that for us growing up, if we didn't have a bunch of characters that reflected us. So either way, we still saw ourselves in the characters that we watched. Even as a little Black girl, if I'm watching a bunch of little white girls in cartoons, I still see myself reflected in them because I never see Black girls on cartoons. So it's something that I think that they can never fully understand and relate to because they don't have the lived experiences that we have. But working in this space, I've seen too many times where I'm reading the facts, I'm reading the news, and there's like the little quotes of like, oh, Black people will be impacted the worst. People of color will be impacted the worst, etc. Working class will be, instead of just talking about us in a little soundbite or just a little talking point, like, we need to actually build up that resource, build up that capacity for those people that we're talking about. So I'm like, look, I'm in the movement. I am that talking point. You're talking about those people. I've given birth 3 times. You know what I'm saying? That could have been me. If you want to talk about the Black woman would be impacted this many times more talking point, boom, here I am in front of you. So I think that gives a lot of us the confidence in the Black and repro space to continue to, stand on what we're talking about, because it's not just our feelings and, oh, we deserve this and we deserve that, but there's decades and decades of real research, and we do have researchers in our coalition, by the way, which is really
Oh,
cool.
yeah.
But there's so much proof and reason behind the necessity of what we're doing. So I just feel like, if you mad, stay mad. But I mean, we're here to stay. There's the state is trying to completely ban abortion, and there's so much that is going to come from that, so much fallout and so many devastating things. And so now more than ever, we need to fight. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. No, I mean, and exactly what I wanted to bring up was just that, Black and repro or otherwise, like this affects everybody, right? It doesn't matter what color we are, what, background, whatever. And I think I absolutely adore the example that you used about being a little Black girl, and still seeing yourself in, the white characters and so on. And, I think folks really need to be able to see the humanity in all of us, no matter what we look like, right? Like, white people should be able to see themselves in us too, and vice versa, and understand that it's about everybody. We're all going to be a part of this fight. And so if Black maternal health, for example, is the floor, wouldn't we want to raise that up because everybody else is going to also do better, right? All boats are going to rise with that tide. So if we're doing well, that means everybody's doing well. That means white women are doing well, Latina, everybody's doing good, right? And so why not? And so I guess that sort of leads to my final question for you. And it's, how can folks get more involved in this work?
That is a good question. So for Black and repro specifically, of course, I would have to speak to, if you are somebody who identifies as Black and you're a birth worker, an advocate, an activist, a researcher, writer, whatever the case is, you definitely should join our coalition. So I think it's Floridians. I would need to look up the actual link to the website, but if you go to our site, you can sign up to join the coalition, and then you can plug into our work group. But I think that even beyond that, there are so many ways to plug into this work. I think some of us want to be involved in politics and policy. Some of us want to be involved in like communications, spreading a message, uplifting messages on online platforms and things like that. So there are a number of ways to get involved in activism, politics, and I always tell people that, of course, you should vote. You should look up if there is an organization or a person, like a reporter or somebody online who you trust and respect, you should follow them and see, because politics can be hard to understand and follow. You don't want to be inundated with information. So you need to start small. You need to read a trusted source and kind of start from there to see what topics you're most interested in. And then you can start to learn and understand how elections impact, whatever issue it is that you care about. So even magazines nowadays are talking about political issues. You could start there. But yeah, if you deep dive, you may become, overwhelmed. So I never recommend that, because we need people. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So take your time. That's a good reminder. Yes, take your time, learn bit by bit, but just do what you can in your, every day and in your community around you.
Perfect. Well, I will be sure to, once you send me the link, include it in our show notes for folks so that they can take a look at all the information that you provided. But more than anything, thank you so very much for joining us, for enlightening me again. Every time I talk to you, it's enlightening. And just for helping spread the word about the importance of reproductive justice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nothing changes in local or national politics unless you vote. And due to recent changes in Florida law, all requests for vote-by-mail ballots expired at the end of 2022. To continue to receive an absentee ballot and be able to vote by mail, contact your local supervisor of elections at myfloridaelections.com/contact-your-SOE and request your absentee ballot today.
Welcome back. Next, we have Ida Eskamani, the Peoples Champion, back on the show to talk with us about what's going on in legislative session as we're wrapping things up here in the state of Florida. Of course, I thought it was perfect to have her on to let us know where things are landing. Hey, Ida, welcome back to Keeping Watch. How are you?
Hi, Natasha. It's so good to join you. I always love seeing your beautiful face and hearing your voice. I'm okay. I'm holding up. Things are rough, but I'm also finding a lot of hope and just a lot of hope in the work that we do and the lawmakers that are defending our freedoms and the everyday people that are organizing around these issues. But it's been a rough session. Yeah. So I'm glad that we're, at the other side.
Yeah. I mean, we're wrapping things up. And, earlier you and I were chatting and you had, I think, aptly described Florida's legislative session with one amazing word, and it was
trash. Just one giant heaping flame of garbage.
Yep. Total trash. And so today we're going to take out that trash. Okay. Let's talk about,
that's right.
Let's dissect, let's jump into that dumpster and pick out pieces of that trash and examine it for what it is. Hopefully we'll find some gems in there, right? Like some maybe nice things that, well, one person's trash is another's treasure. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But
I appreciate your optimism.
So yeah, I mean, we're about winding down, but what are some of the things that you think you want to kind of draw attention to as we're closing things out here?
Yeah, I think tragically, there's a lot of tragedy, I'd say, but I think tragically, this continues to be the best legislature money can buy. When you look at, no matter what the governor says, no matter this sort of narrative about, we are, going after woke corporations, for example, all these different things that the legislative leadership pretend to care about. When you look at the receipts and the bills that have passed, corporations and billionaires had a wonderful legislative session, and it's working people that are left in the dust per usual, right? I find a lot of inspiration through the incredible organizing that continues to happen. Our lawmakers who have fought tooth and nail to defend working class communities and Black and brown folk, and just building that multiracial movement to defend our democracy and defend our freedoms. But we've seen a lot of really bad bills and really like a corporate wish list get passed this year. I'll drop a few just examples, right? We have for years have been fighting this anti-union bill, a legislation written by conservative think tanks, funded by billionaires to undermine workers' right to organize in this state. And this is legislation we've been able to beat off consecutively for years now. But it passed this session. It passed. And there's nothing more pro corporate greed than tackling like unions way to organize. Like going after organized labor is going after people and the power of people over corporations. And so that bill passed. It was a priority of the governor, and it passed. It specifically targets public sector unions. It carved out law enforcement and correctional officers, but it included teachers, included cafeteria workers, bus drivers, waste management. And so when you look at the jobs that were impacted, they were disproportionately jobs that are led by women, jobs that are led by minorities, by Black and brown folk, some of the lowest income jobs in the state, and also some of the most dangerous jobs. Waste management is consecutively one of the deadliest jobs in America.
I didn't know that.
Yes. And so, yeah. And these are hard jobs, and these are skilled labor. Like there's no such thing as unskilled labor, right? And so, but they carve out law enforcement, firefighters, correctional officers, which, you know, everyone has a right to a union, right? So including those workers that are impacted, but also those fields that were protected disproportionately are white and male dominated and donate to Republican candidates. So it's like very political, very ideologically driven. And whether they meant to or not, I mean, it's like explicitly impacting women and people of color and their right to organize, right? And that bill passed, but a few other ones as well. This bill that would erase every local renter protection.
Yeah, I saw that.
That bill passed.
Oh my gosh.
A huge corporate giveaway to these massive corporate landlords that are oftentimes multinational corporations. When you follow the money in the landlord and like developer world, you will find a lot of monopoly kind of characteristics where a huge swath of the market is currently being run by just a small number of ultra wealthy people and corporations. They might put up different front groups, right? But the money, when you follow it, it's a lot of the same money. So we're seeing a trend towards monopolies in the housing industry, and they're buying out apartments, they're buying out mobile home communities and single family homes. And of course, with monopolies, you have less competition, lower quality, and like higher costs. And so you're seeing that in housing. And so these corporations basically wanted to erase all the local wins we've had by using a tool called preemption. It's a policy tool where you basically, a higher government can override a lower government's law. So they basically passed House Bill 1417 to erase every single local win we've had during the pandemic to protect renters locally. They have not only erased them, they banned any other local government from passing these. We also saw legislation that would allow basically perpetual renter junk fees.
What?
To be charged. Yeah. So let me tell you about that.
Wait, hold on. So, first, before we get into the junk fees, I just want to tease out that piece that you were talking about. So first, the workers protection. So it's like across the board, we're saying that certain workers can have certain rights and others can't. And they're just sort of picking and choosing who they want to give those sort of rights to. Is that right? I mean, kind of boiled down a little bit. Okay, so we're picking and choosing.
You're right. Does that sound like is that freedom to you, Natasha? Does that sound like freedom?
So all right, so we're gonna pick and choose who can collectively bargain for things like benefits, time off, wages, etc. Okay, fine, that's one thing.
Yep.
Okay, the second, right,
working families.
So now those same workers probably rent, right? And now you're saying that if in Tallahassee or Miami or Orlando, wherever, that the legislature in Tallahassee gets to decide for all these different cities, counties, so from the Panhandle to the Keys, whether or not or what kinds of protections you would get for living there. So it's like going to be the same no matter what. So like if I live in Miami and let's say I don't like it because there aren't enough protections, I'm just kind of, just for the sake of an example, I don't really know, I don't live there, and I decide I want to move, I'd have to like leave the state, basically, is what you're telling me. I couldn't just like go to another town or whatever and be like, I'm still living in Florida. Yeah. So any protections and making it easier for corporations to monopolize the rental market. And so like within that market, let's say I'm living somewhere and I'm not a fan of the way they manage that property. Maybe they're not fixing things on time, or maybe, you know, there are safety issues, whatever. And I try to, you know, once my lease is up, I try to legally go and make another decision as an informed consumer. And you're telling me that's going to be the same guy, but like maybe the name is different or whatever. Okay. So I can't move in my town. I can't leave town. I can't bargain for the wages that would make it more affordable so that maybe I want to just buy my house. I don't know. And now you're telling me on top of that, we got junk fees. What are these junk fees?
Yeah, girl, you got it. And actually, this is like, it gets even more infuriating because a lot of the money behind corporate landlords that are also buying out supply, right? So you hear this narrative a lot. We need supply. We need supply. We need to build more housing. A lot of these bills are tax incentives to developers without any accountability around, will you actually build affordable housing? So we're also just handing out tax dollars to developers, many of whom created this housing crisis because they've been price gouging and manipulating the market.
That's not a free market.
And we've seen a lot of evidence. Like, no, it is not. And like, you know, it's also not a free market. It's not a free market to just give away millions of tax dollars to certain companies and not to others. That is not a free market. So this market ain't free. It is rigged to serve certain corporations and billionaires who often are big donors, right, to a lot of these legislative leaders when you follow the money. And the other layer to this, in housing in particular, because a lot of these big multinational apartment complexes are backed by private equity, right? So this gets like real nefarious. This gets like into a lot of money, a lot of billionaire money, right? And it's really around like slash and burn. So they'll buy out, for example, like mobile home communities and immediately milk as much money as they can off of them. So they will like cut services, hike up rents, and they don't care about quality. They're just trying to make as much money as they can, and they just leave it. And then once they milk everything they can out of it, they abandon it. But nobody can afford to rebuild it, right? So it's also, they're often like decimating our housing supply, or they're buying out single family homes too, and literally taking away the opportunity of homes for people to buy. Because you see more and more of these same private equity backed multinational firms buying out single family homes, which is basically a technical term for like, you know, a home in suburbia, right? Like just a home in your neighborhood. So those are being bought out and rented as well. So we're also just seeing, it's not necessarily a supply issue. There is a supply issue, but it's also like, who is building them and for whom? And so to the junk fees, a lot of the same investors behind corporate landlords that are buying a housing supply, it's a lot of the same money behind these like tech companies that are pushing this solution to security deposits, which is called fees in lieu of security deposits. But it's basically a fake renter's insurance and a payday loan sort of concept. So it's basically going to vulnerable renters who cannot afford a security deposit, which, by the way, in Florida, there's no cap to your security deposit. It can be as high as a landlord wants. And they can actually, same here, as a renter, like they can unofficially, like they can inflate it as well to force you to go with a fee option instead. There's no cap on this fee. There's no regulatory framework on this fee. It's not real insurance. You still owe damages. And in fact, these companies that are in charge of these fees will go after you and actually sell, like they'll charge you for damages that you had nothing to do with. You don't have a real process to challenge the damages. It'll impact your credit score, and they'll often sell that debt to debt collectors, and all of a sudden you're being chased by a debt collector now. So it guts security deposit protections in Florida, which for renters are some of the only protections we have left, are your security deposits. So it totally guts that. And it's just another way to profiteer off the housing crisis, right? And a lot of renters we have found through conversations that have used these products didn't realize it wasn't insurance. They thought a monthly fee was covering damages, and it wasn't. So it adds a lot of consumer confusion, which is by design. And of course, the folks that are disproportionately impacted are low income people, are middle class people, working class people, because it's very expensive to be poor. It's expensive to be poor. Like, Florida is not free for the working class. It's free if you are of means and you can afford all these different things. But when we're living paycheck to paycheck, which this state is making that the standard, and now you can't organize for your wages, you can't pass these local laws to protect renters. Now you've got this new fee on top of already all the junk fees that renters are charged. And then I don't even get into what the utility companies are trying to do to buy out our municipal utilities and take over municipal utilities. And also, there was also a bill that was passed that would double interest rates on certain loans, like predatory loans. It was double the interest rates on them. And these are all being backed by various different corporations and ultra wealthy folks that just want to make more money off of an affordability crisis they created with no accountability. But again, you know, I'm not surprised that these entities are driven by greed. That's what they do. That's capitalism. That's what they do. When the legislature just lets it happen. Yeah, because the government is
supposed to be looking out for the little guys. And I say this, and they're not.
Exactly. And I say this a lot. Like, you know, I've done so much organizing. I continue to door knock and talk to folks, get people registered to vote, all this good stuff, right? Which, by the way, the legislature has also worked to make harder to register people to vote. So and that bill is being backed by these far right think tanks, the Heritage Foundation. Like, they're known to want to make it harder for certain people to vote, easier for others, right? Exactly. All those things, voter intimidation, all of it. And so if our vote didn't matter so much, they wouldn't make it so hard to vote, right? I mean, I always remind people of that. And the other piece I say, because folks always say, government doesn't work. Government doesn't work. It's inefficient. Government doesn't solve problems. Let me tell you, government is working very hard. Your Florida government is working very hard.
That's just
not for you. It's working very hard for corporations, for billionaires, for far-right ideologues. It's working very efficiently for them. So imagine if we were able to turn that machine around and work for people. It'd be transformational. And that is why, like, I continue to fight this fight, because I believe in that vision and that government can work for us. And we have a lot of lawmakers that are proving that, right? That are fighting tooth and nail, not just on the House floor, but in constituent services too, right? Like, just constantly working to serve the people who elected them to office. But if you think government doesn't work, I need you to just, like, take a look at all these bills that are moving and who they're moving them for. It's working.
Well, if it doesn't
just
work,
not for us.
why are those, those special interests, those corporations investing so much money into government, right?
Absolutely.
Investing it into the people that are willing to do their bidding. I mean, it's like, it's the same thing with, like, when you look at, for example, we have our project at the Hub, DeSantis Watch. And, I travel around and talk to people about, the investment that is required in the state of Florida as he is ramping up for his presidential, election or campaign. And it's like, he was the most well-funded governor in U.S. history.
Which is all I need to know. Right. This is the thing. Like,
what does that tell you?
In politics, there's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of gray areas, a lot of, like, personalities, drama, When you talk money, it is so clear. There is no misunderstanding. And Ron DeSantis tries to act like he is this outlier, like he is like somehow the outside guy. No, he is so in deep in this swamp. He is the establishment candidate. That is why all these well-known billionaires are funding him. He is their pick, their establishment guy. And no matter what he tries to pretend to be that he isn't, his record, the receipts show that he is very aligned with these big greedy corporate donors.
This is his session. These are his bills. And this is what he's asking for.
Exactly. Right. Literally. Yeah. And, like, the Disney stuff, like, is such a show. And I say this a lot. Like, if this man really cared to hold any corporation accountable, he would pass policy like combined reporting, which is a very simple policy that would basically ensure corporations pay what they owe. Because right now, corporations are basically pretending to be multiple subsidiaries to hide their money, to claim they have no profit, Therefore, they don't have to pay an income tax in Florida. So there's a very simple policy that like over 20 states have passed to basically say, no, you are one entity. You must pay what you owe in taxes. We have pushed this bill every year. And somehow, magically, the governor just doesn't seem to know about it, doesn't seem to pass it. Like, so if he really cared about holding corporations accountable, he would make sure they pay the taxes they owe. He would veto all of these bills I just talked about, and he would treat them all the same. And so far, what I have seen, that the only entity that's been able to beat Walt Disney World are the union workers who just won an $18 minimum wage this year. They've been able to beat Disney, working people, not Ron DeSantis. And he doesn't even want to beat them. Like he's like passing plenty. He's handing out plenty of money. I know, bro. I feel you. But
you're right.
I feel like those British business people just bored and exhausted of the man. I'm so
right. He's so lame. No, but I mean, back to what you were saying about like the powers with the people. You know, anytime we come together and we decide, you know, to take matters into our own hands, we get really great results. You know, because you talk about, you know, the Disney minimum, you know, the wage. I'm thinking about like the Florida minimum wage, right? The constitutional amendment. I'm thinking 100%. About, you know, the restoration of voting rights for our returning citizens, so our friends and neighbors, right?
Absolutely.
So, you know, I don't know. It just kind of to give it sort of a positive turn in this conversation. Are there anything? Is there anything you want to highlight this session that you saw that was a bright spot?
Oh my goodness, I find so much inspiration by all the people that have just never been politically engaged before, but now are, because they've just like witnessed and woke up to what the legislature is doing. When you see, particularly on, I mean, so many issues, but I'll speak to like education, for example. You know, we've seen the governor aligned with billionaires that are like very far right and ideologically driven, trying to take over our higher education system, trying to remove certain courses around like women's history, Black history. We've seen, of course, like professors targeted, free academic freedom targeted, and to see so many young people, so many students organize against these, to see academics organize, like to see hand in hand workers and students and professors all coming together to fight off these various like really dangerous bills is so inspiring. And to see the lawmakers that we elected that really champion these issues and put forward dozens of amendments to fight these fights. It's really beautiful to see. You know, the abortion ban, which is not yet implemented because it has like a trigger on it when the Supreme Court decides on the 15-week abortion ban, which we expect to happen this summer. But right now, abortion is still legal up to 15 weeks in Florida. But, you know, the abortion rights champions in the legislature, they filed over 50 amendments on that bill. And 50, which is like, and I know that might be for folks who aren't familiar with the legislative process, which like, why would you be that might just be like a random number. But usually bills, like if they get amendments, it'll be like 3 to 5, maybe right? So, right. And so folks like organized and talk to people, like talk to providers, talk to patients, talk to women, talk to people who have had abortions. And so like, what amendments do you want to see? So these ideas came from people too, but put forward 50 amendments, fought everyone tooth and nail, you know, forced a lot of votes on these issues, forced debates and conversations on these issues. On the anti-renter rights bills, dozens of amendments filed on those as well. On that junk fees bill, same thing. Like our champions in the legislature are fighting so hard for people and really working to elevate the stories that the majority doesn't want told. And so that's just really beautiful to see. And I will say there's a narrative out there that you have to, as a Democrat, you have to be quiet or like, you know, play along to get along to pass policy. But I think this session has shown that's not the case. And I'll give one quick example with the tax break for diapers. That was a bill put forward by my twin sister, Representative Ida Eskamani, and Senator Lauren Book, who's the leader of the Democratic caucus on the Senate side. That is a bill that's been put forward by folks who have championed abortion rights, who have championed all these key issues. And that was, the governor has taken that as like one of his priorities. It's in the tax package, like it is passing, and it's a big deal. And it's a win from lawmakers that did not shy away from the fights, right? And so it's one of a few examples of when you center people and you organize and you are just relentless in the fight, that you can pass good things and good policy. And so I hope it inspires more folks to fight and to organize and to be a part of this process. And just as much as we hold folks accountable, we need to lift up our heroes and our champions, right? Because I believe that government can work for us when we have the right folks in those positions and when people have a seat at the policymaking table. And that is the dream that I'll continue to look for. That's my North Star. And I'm just really proud of so many folks who came out and testified, who fought the good fight, and who, you know, hope is a practice, like hope is a discipline. And so I am not going to lose hope. I'm going to continue to build it and to find resilient, defiant joy in like our communities, like hundreds of drag queens coming to the Capitol. Like there's just so many beautiful moments from this session. Incredible. And like, just so many folks refuse to be silenced and refuse to let this process dictate them and the lives that we live. And so, you know, we're defending our freedoms and we're in a fight. Like this is a war. And I'm just really proud to be on the right side of history.
That's perfect. Yeah, me too. Proud to be in this fight with you. You know, and it's not over till it's over, right? There will be other legislative sessions, maybe more specials. Who knows? There will be. Oh, God, I mean, I'm not gonna. Let's pretend like I didn't say that.
No, but I know. Knock on wood. No, but I feel you. It's. And I just think, I just remind myself that even when we lose the battles, the war, we've not lost the war. And so why keep score? Like I'm going to keep fighting. So, and we need more people to join us. So like all this is about, the way we're going to win is belly to belly conversations with our community, with our neighbors, with our coworkers, with our colleagues, and meeting people where they're at and really showing people like, this is our vision of the future. This is the current vision. And like, join us to fight for a Florida that works for all of us, right? So I do hope that folks post-session, like take a breath and like get a little bit of a break if you can. But we're going to keep fighting.
That's perfect. Yep. We're going to keep on fighting. Thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to further conversations on the other side of all of this. And yeah, please take good care. Get that time off that you deserve. And I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Natasha. Thank you for everything that you do. And like, if there's any time off we can take, thank a union worker. And solidarity forever is all I got to say right now.
That's perfect.
This show and all of our work would be impossible without your support. At Florida Watch, we do research, create graphics and video content, and keep an eye on issues that matter to all of us. We also work hard to keep things fun and informative with our goal to hold accountable extreme politicians like Ron DeSantis. Head over to floridawatch.org and click donate to support our cause to help keep up the fight to keep Florida educated, fair, and tolerant. Florida has faced a growing affordability crisis with the cost of rent, utility bills, and insurance going through the roof. All while Ron DeSantis has tried to divide us and distract us from the favors he does for his billionaire corporate donors to advance his political ambitions. DeSantis Watch is a project dedicated to shining a spotlight on the governor's failures of leadership that make all of us less free. Go to DeSantisWatch.org and join the movement.
I just want to thank everybody for listening this week as we talked about the wrap up to legislative session, reproductive justice. And as always, we will have all the links from today's show and ways that you can get involved in the show notes below. And I look forward to having you back next time. Take care, everybody.